morning. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to come back again to ACCES. I really enjoy connecting with people like yourselves. And wherever you are, I think, the next 60 minutes, or maybe I would say now 40 minutes, we will be talking about, how you can really rock your next virtual interview. Especially a lot of these tips and tricks would be very Canadian focused, a lot of things which I have experienced and learned from even other colleagues and friends and mentors and mentees, and I've really tried to keep it simple and collated. So here we go. And of course, I would love to have your questions if you have in the chat box, or we can have a Q&A session later so we can, I think follow the lead there. So with that, I'm going to start with a bit of, what is the new realm of the virtual interviews. And as I think you all know that after COVID, there has been a huge spike of virtual interviews. Gone are the days where, when we had an interview, we would drive down to office, we would spend that half of day, meeting and getting ready and prepping and, planning our day. But now I think a lot of interviews are getting virtual. Still, there are companies which are now moving back to in-person, but I think the ratio and the percentage is kind of skewed there. So this is important for us to know because, with the adoption of social distancing in many countries, especially Canada, we've seen that a lot of companies are shifting to virtual interviews. And in fact, there was a survey where we saw that a lot of employees are really adopting virtual. And a lot of data also comes from Korn Ferry, where we say that 75% of executives surveyed use real-time video to interview leading candidates, and 50% leverage it to narrow down their applicants. So what does this data mean to us? This data mean to us a couple of things. One, that virtual interviews are here to stay. Two, it also shows us that a lot of companies are taking screening, or they are taking that first initial, when you apply for a job, you will have a lot of interest. A lot of companies are taking that step and they're reducing the burden on HR, on the other teams to, really meet people in the first round. So they're kind of doing a lot of those rounds in screening. And then you kind of might be or may not be invited to the office to an in-person interview. That means that virtual interviews are even more important to us. Virtual interviews are, how do you manage, how do you make this shine is really important. With that, I think I wanted to keep this slide and this session very simple. So I really wanted to show what are some of the do's, which is we would really want to do in a virtual session. First of all, I really feel it's all okay that when we would travel to in-person interview, we would typically take a notepad and a pen. Do continue doing that even in a virtual interview, because what happens is if you might be taking notes, you might be technology savvy and you might take notes on the computer while you're talking, it might signal something else to the interviewer because they might mistake it for multitasking. So it's always good to have a pen and paper and write if you want to write a note, or you want to, if there's a point to discuss you want to come back on, write it there rather than typing it on the on your interview. And again, you wouldn't want to type very frantically, and that noise will be, I think, annoying too. So that's something which you should be, and it's always good if you're not sure, you can ask the interviewer that, hey, I hope it's okay that I can take some notes. In that ways, they know that you're taking notes, etc. The other thing is very, very important is test your technology and do a dry run. I can't stress enough, you've got that interview, you've got that 1 hour, 30 minutes, whatever slot. You want to make sure that you really optimize and shine there and not really worry about technology. So if you are not comfortable using Zoom, Skype, or anything, please make sure that it's downloaded on your computer. I would really encourage to take an interview on a laptop. or a desktop rather than a phone, unless it's a non-video interview. So make sure that your camera and your technology is good. Again, also a sub point with this would be set the scene and minimize distractions. You don't want to sit in a place in the house where you have 10 people walking behind you, or you have some really personal quotations, posters, or anything. Try and make sure that you behind you have a blank wall or a minimal wall which is not distracting. The next is sit down prepared. If you want to have a bottle of water, a glass of water, or anything around you while you're doing an interview, make sure that you keep it, in advance. The other piece is very important is, monitor your body language. A lot of people are not very, are not very camera savvy. They do not know where to see. Like, do you see the camera on the computer, or do you see the interview on the screen below? So those are some of the things which you should be really understanding about. And even better, if you want, you can take a mock like a Zoom or a Skype with your relative, your partner, your colleague, your friend, whoever is available, so that you can see, or you can record and you can see how you look, or how your expressions, or how your body language is available in the in when you kind of talk. The next is dress the part. I mean, again, very important is you dress as good as you would have dressed in an in-person interview. Just don't wear a t-shirt or any random clothes which doesn't make you look professional. I think that's the key. You should be looking as professional as you would be going in an in-person interview. And lastly, I would really encourage is to make a connection. Like, try to start the interview as you would in an in-person. You would handshake, and then you would look into the eyes and make a connection. Of course, you can't shake hands, but what you could do is start with this positive smile, start with that eye contact on the screen, and then go ahead. So I feel these are some of the really important things to really do when you're doing an interview. Then, if that was the do's, what's the don'ts? I think don'ts would be, really understanding that, you don't take it lightly. So that means that you have the same level of prep or seriousness as it would be an in-person, interview. Make sure that you are not late. So if the meeting is at 12, make sure that you dry down your technology, and you are maybe, even if you're waiting, you don't have to be like 10, 15 minutes or 10 minutes earlier than the meeting time, but make sure you're a minute or two, because, sometimes it happens that if there's a lag, is an internet connection or something, you just want to make sure that you show up on their screen, and they can then admit you in the meeting room. I would say don't use creative backgrounds. When I say creative, I mean to say, a very political or very, controversial backgrounds. You want to you might keep all of that in your personal life, but not like, imagine when you would go on an in-person interview, would you take, would you take a political backdrop with you, or a controversial backdrop with you? No, right? You would just go as a person. So similarly, when you're sitting, you don't want to have a YOLO solo or any of those things in the background. So make sure that you have a very plain, professional, and, like a background which is, I would say, representative of whom you are, because you don't want to give an opportunity to unnecessarily make a judgment about you. On things which actually doesn't matter in that interview. What matters is your technical skills. What matters is your fitment for the role, correct? So you don't want to give a chance. Use a silly username. I know we've had a lot of, emails and usernames which might be sometimes not professional enough. So make sure your, screen name or your Zoom name or whatever is popping up is your name, preferably your first name and your last name. But please try and avoid and change any silly, or if you are using somebody else's, like your family member's laptop, make sure that you change the name before you logging in. And that's why I said don't be late. Like, you do this before you log in, right? You don't do this at the day and time of interview. And with that is, fiddle with the camera and get distracted. Again, if you've practiced, if you've rehearsed how you look in the camera, where to look in the screen, I think these things will be, will be already taken care of. So please don't fiddle with the camera, set it and don't touch it again and again. You're not taking a selfie. You don't want to look how your hair looks again and again. Just make sure that you are consistent. And the other thing is, don't read something from the computer. People who interview are smart people. They interview day in and day out. They can see if you're reading something on the computer. So make sure that you have, because your eye movements change when you're reading and you're talking. So make sure that you are not reading something and you are genuinely talking as you would talk in person. So those are some of the don'ts of the interview. And these are some of the, I would say, common mistakes which I have collated. Like, what are the common mistakes many candidates are currently making when using virtual interviewing platform? I think, again, I'm going to repeat this, that first is inadequate, preparation. A lot of people think that, hey, it's virtual, so it's easy, I can take it quick, I know I have my notes around me on my table, nobody's going to see them, and I can be okay, I can refer quickly. But it's not the case. Would you do that if you would go in an in-person interview? Would you take like your bundle of notes with you in that table? No, right? Why would this be different? And because this interview is going to make or break your chances to move in the second round or to get that final offer, you really want to make sure that you are serious and you are having that adequate, preparation. And a lot of times, we also have these interviews which are, I would say, pre-recorded. Like a lot of IT companies, a lot of companies are having pre-recorded interviews where it's like you get a, like a computer-based interview where there's a question which is asked, and then you're given in that, interview 5 minutes to think or 2 minutes to think. And then you kind of record your answer, and you're given like a couple of chances, like you can discard that, but you're given only 2 chances. Like you recorded your answer and you heard it again and you feel you want to add something or you want to improvise on that answer, you get another chance. But that's it. You just maybe get 2 or 3 chances for each question. So make sure that, again, if it's pre-recorded or on demand, it doesn't mean that you don't prepare. The whole reason of having a pre-recorded or on-demand interview was to, understand about how we can, how HR or how hiring managers can really, effectively manage large candidate population or pool. And they can also, view on demand, and then they can decide who they want to go ahead. So that is something which is, I think, important, that even if it's a on-demand pre-recorded interview, make sure that you prepare enough, because again, that's an elimination interview. So you will be eliminated based on the responses, or you might be chosen based on the responses. And the third thing is, again, is don't feel pressured to stare during the camera. Like when we are talking to somebody, do we like 24 by always look in their eyes? No, right? We kind of look here and there. So make it seem natural. And I'm sorry for that background noise. I'm sorry for that. You can imagine it's a vacation, so and it's a Friday. Well, coming back, so please don't feel pressured to stare directly into the camera. Make it as a natural, seamless conversation. And the more natural and more relaxed you seem, the more better the engagement would be. And at the end, you are trying to strike that balance and contribution and that conversation with the interviewer. Last but not the least, by all means, silence your phone. You don't want to have a call coming up or that text beeping or that Facebook alert or anything which happens. So please silence that phone for 30 minutes on 1 hour. If you're expecting a very important call at that time, either delegate that phone to somebody in your family or make sure that you reschedule the time of the phone call. And then, these are some of the things which I've seen having the common mistakes. And it also shows like your phone ringing, like you're not prepared enough or you are not taking it seriously. So make sure that you kind of, have that sensibilities in advance. So then going ahead, I think I would really want to say is, the key takeaway would be close out the interview strong. One of the best ways to leave a lasting impression is to come prepared with questions about the company, job, and hiring manager. Don't waste that opportunity. Don't waste that opportunity to not ask questions, which shows your preparedness, which shows your knowledge about the team, the company, you will be potentially working with. You want to keep yourself update, what's happening, and ask questions. So one of the few questions tips I can give you to ask would be like, what does an ideal candidate look like in this role? In this way, you are asking them, your interviewer, to, and you're understanding what is an ideal candidate they are seeking in this role. So then when they answer, then maybe you can add on, if you did not get an opportunity still, that, hey, I did this, or I have done this, and I totally agree with you, and I align with you, or something like that. One of the good safest questions would be, of course, would be like, how do you see growth in this role? And that answer will help you understand what's the true vision of that role, or what's the career path for that role. And this would be a question. The other question could be about how do my 30, 60, and 90 days look in the role? Again, all of these questions have to be tweaked according to the role, the hierarchy, the level you're going. So please do not take this question. These are just an example or indicative questions I'm trying to just help you out with, which might help. And lastly, do not forget to ask about what the next steps would be. You really want to understand how many rounds there would be, how many uh, you know selection or elimination rounds would be, or what's the typical process? Is it 2 weeks, or 2 months, or 2 years? You want to understand that, because when you understand that, it helps you to follow up. Because if you haven't heard from the HR for 2 weeks, and the interviewer already told you that, hey, after this interview next week I will be on vacation, and when I come back, then, so that 2 weeks is already gone, so you don't have to panic. So it's important for you to understand and align on the timeline of next steps, because that's going to really help you to, really manage, really understand the expectations. And it also shows your interest about how involved you are in the interview, in the process, etc. So those are some of the things which, I definitely believe you should be taking care of. And Keisha, I'm going to pause here. I'm seeing a lot of questions coming in the chat. Keisha, can you hear me? Okay, I'm not sure. Keisha, can you hear me? You are on mute. Okay, so I am not able to hear her, but you know what? Let me start taking questions. And by the way, I'm going to take a pause. If you have any questions for me, please start typing in the chat. We can, I think, go ahead, and I'm going to try my best to answer that. So please, and also I want to tell you one thing: no question is silly, or no question is naive. Just kind of ask. So I think the first question I see here is from somebody who says, what skills do Canadian recruiters look for? I would say this question is a very, I would say, a broad question. This is very, it depends on which I would say sector you're doing in. I'm just trying to take a moment to think of this. Like, how do I kind of better answer in this time? So I feel the first important thing of Canadian recruiters look is in a candidate is how easily or how fast they can be integrated in the company. And some of the skills which they look out to that question is communication. I know we've always heard about communication, but communication doesn't mean an accent. I want to really clarify that. Like, you don't have to have an accent to have a communication. You can have your natural accent, but communicate well. When I say communicate, means articulate well. It means how do you articulate that question? How do you articulate that answer? That's what is communication and articulation. So those are some of the skills they look, unless you're having a very technical job wherein, it's like a coding job or very technical, not a very client facing job. That's when maybe you do not need a lot of articulation, but I would actually not agree. You need articulation and communication everywhere. So that's something which Canadian recruiters look for. So these come in soft skills, right? So communication and, taking feedback positively, trying to work on, there. I think those are some of the things which are apart from, technical skills, because soft skills are something which is, not, I mean, there's nothing Canadian. It's a very global soft skill which you should have, which is communication, good articulation, understanding and taking good feedback. I would say eagerness to learn. And I think other thing is, like I said, at the end, the goal is that how easily or how fast you can be integrated into the workplace. So if you have experience, if you worked, in cross-cultural teams, if you worked in multicultural teams or, different countries, please, please don't shy from telling that, because that's going to help the interviewer to understand, how you can be assimilated in the system faster. I hope that answers the question, Chirag. So I'm going to move to the next question. Would it be appropriate to use a blurred background? My desk and camera look out into my living room. Absolutely. I mean, blurring background is good, because if it looks into your living room, chances are that, there might be people walking, or that, when you've given enough warnings to your kid, but that's one time when your kid wants to run in the background. It's not that people don't understand that. It's totally okay. We are living a life also. But yes, blurring background is totally good. Or, I'm sure there are multiple backgrounds available on your Teams or anything where you have like a neutral background, like a white background. You can download a white background and just keep it. Like, you don't have to, or there are a lot of templates in the background. But again, I typically prefer a white background, because then but again, you don't want a white background and you're wearing a white shirt, so you wouldn't show off, in the screen well. So make sure that your clothes and your background are coordinated well enough. So I think, but then to answer your question, it's absolutely appropriate to use a blurred background. Okay, so that answers. The next question is, 2 years ago, I was being told to take my notes with me to an in-person job description copy. So why not have this information had? Yeah, I mean, to be honest, my friend, like, job description copy. So okay, in a difference between an virtual and in-person. In-person, we used to hand over the copy of our resume and all of that. But I think right now, what we do in a virtual is they already have your CV. So in a ideal world, they would open your CV. So you don't have to give your CV. The job description is for you. The fact that you are in the, I would say, in an interview stage, that means you and they both kind of know the job. So that's fine. Like, you don't have to carry a copy. Pre-written questions to ask the interviewer. Yes, absolutely. And this is what I was saying. Like, you can have this information in a virtual interview besides your desk. Like, a lot of them, you might be nervous, you might forget. So you should have those questions in your notes or wherever your notebook is, in the interview process for sure. So yeah, I mean, like I said, you should treat a virtual interview as an in-person, but of course, with some changes, like you will not share your copy of resume, etc. Right? So I hope that answers your question. So the next question upcoming is about pre-recorded interviews. Do ADS do further screening of those? And again, I am not a representative of like a lot of companies, and I'm not an HR. But my experience and my understanding goes that pre-recorded interviews, when you kind of respond to that and it's recorded, it goes to the either the hiring manager or the HR, and they do it. I don't think an ATS would screen those responses because those questions are behavioral. They would be open-ended, like what is your strength. How would an ATS track what is your strength question, for example. So I don't believe that would be the case. But again, like I said, I'm not an HR, but I don't believe it would be a ATS. The pre-recorded interviews are then taken by HR or hiring manager. I hope that answers. How many questions is appropriate to ask at the end of the interview? Great. You don't want to overwhelm the interviewer. You don't want to, I would say, overwhelm the interviewer for asking like so many questions. At the same time, you want to make sure that you learn whatever you wanted to in those questions. And it also depends on the time. So maybe the interview was scheduled for 1 hour, but you like your interview questions, they were asking you and it was a conversation which went long, and now you only have 5 minutes left to ask a question. And in that case, you can maybe ask only one question, right? Like, I don't think you can ask 3 or 4 questions, even if you had. So choose your best question. Again, I would write, I would again encourage you to write your top questions and make, when you prepare, like, okay, this is one question I really want to ask because this question is going to demonstrate my skills and my understanding of the role, and it might be an aha moment for the interviewer. So maybe that is one question you want to ask, and then also, but I would say is acknowledge when you have 5 minutes, acknowledge that, yes, I know that I have only 5 minutes, so maybe I can squeeze in like a question. A lot of times the interviewer might say that, hey, I know we gave you only 5 minutes to ask, but if you have more questions, we can extend more 5 minutes. Is that okay with you? And then if they give you extra 5 or 10 minutes, it's great. Then you can ask all your questions. But if that's not the case, and if it's a hard stop, what you can do is just ask that one question. But I would really encourage you to ask that question about next step after that one question, because I think that's very important for you to know and to set expectations from both the ends about follow-up if needed in the next round. So I hope that answers your question. Somebody is asking, please write down the questions, thanks. This session is recorded, so I think you can go back and listen to the questions I said. Great. What skills do Canadian look for? I did not get what is being referred to. What skills do Canadian recruiters? That was the question first. I hope that answers. The next question is, can you repeat the questions to be asked? Absolutely. Like if you didn't hear properly or if you didn't understand, you can definitely ask the questions. Or maybe you can, what you could also do is like, one way is like, hey, can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I didn't follow you. Totally okay. Or the second is, hey, I know you asked this question, but can I rephrase? Like, this is what my understanding is you're asking. Did I rephrase it right? You can also do that way. So it depends on you how, you feel comfortable, but the answer is definitely you can ask, those questions. Okay, next is sometimes in job description, some of the points are not understandable. or apart from the role, if we want clear that part of job description, what is the right way and what is the right time to ask? Good point. When you don't understand a part of job description, I think the typical best time is to ask if in your first interview, your screening interview, when like the first time you are like, hey, we invite you, we saw you, we got your resume, we want to talk to you. The first time you talk, that's the time you want to ask that and you want to get clarity. But a lot of times it happens that the first time somebody calls you is an HR, if your question is a little technical, they might not have an answer. So they might tell you that, okay, what we can do is, if the hiring manager chooses to go forward with you, we can, what we can do is you can ask this question at the time of, should you be selected in the second round? If that's the case, then you can ask that question when you meet the hiring manager, who would have more clarity, because HR, a lot of times might not have clarity on that answer. So it depends on which stage and where you are when you have to ask that question. So I hope you got that answer. Okay, next question is, after first interview pass, how long second? It depends. It really depends on the company. Like, are they looking to hire somebody in like a week? Are they flexible? Are they really looking for the right candidate? Unfortunately, there's not a right or wrong answer or a like a timeline. It'll depend on company, the role, the type, and everything. So that's why I encouraged you to ask that question in the last question when you ask in the interview that, hey, what's the next steps? Because that's when they will let you know what's the next step. It's 2 weeks, 2 months, 1 week, 2 days, whatever. And then you can have that expectation. I am newcomer having international experience, but no Canadian in the field of HR. How can I sell myself to interview to get the job where the other candidates have relevant? Okay, this is always going to be the case, right? And this, you knew when you were coming to Canada that you would not have the Canadian experience. And as I mentioned earlier, that Canadian experience essentially would be how soon, how fast you can integrate into the system, how soon you can work with the company, how soon you can, be employed. I think that's what they look for. So you will have to give that example of, I would say, cross-functional or global experience if you ever had. So that's important. So I would say, just kind of focus on your soft skills and then show that passion, show that experience that you are really kind of looking, forward to join, and you are a quick learner. And I think that's how you would convince in your job interviews. Next question would be, let me know the dress code for men and women. I'm not sure what you're asking, but I would just say it should be professional. Next question would be, could you suggest some mock interview apps where one could practice for interviews? I would say, a lot of, I don't know apps personally because I have not used apps, but I'm sure if you Google and you can find them. And one of the suggestions would be, you can also look at Glassdoor and other websites where they typically have interview questions for that role and, which typically has been asked. So you can get some good references there. But unfortunately, I don't know apps, but I'm sure there would be. And if you Google, you will find something. All the best there. Next question would be, how can I keep calm during an interview? Oh, if I knew that answer, I think I'm really not sure what kind of a personality you are, because different people react to different situations differently. But I think one of the things is just take a deep breath, and there's only so much you can control. There is some things which is beyond your control. So just focus on what you can control, which is answering the questions, prepping for the interview, all of that. Take a deep breath and you should be okay. Next question. During the interview, is it all right to ask salary? Absolutely. Why not? This is an interview, and in fact, a lot of times the salary, if again, which interview it is it like a screening HR interview? If it's an HR's first round or first screening, then you should definitely ask what's the salary range. If they are not saying, or typically they would ask you like, what are you expecting, either ways. But if it's a technical or the second round, and I wouldn't ask that in that round. I would have cleared that question before. And in all interviews, there would be a first screening interview for sure with the HR, and that's where you want to answer that. So I hope that answers. How many days after the interview we should expect decision? Again, I think I answered this question, that you should be asking this question at the time of the interview, in the last, what's the timelines for the next steps? That's where you would know when you can expect a decision. Next question. What questions HR ask? HR would ask a lot of questions, and it would be related to the job description, of course. There would be some behavioral questions, like what is your strength, what is your weakness, tell me about yourself. So make sure that you prep those questions. But again, it will totally depend on which industry, with the role, which sector, which hierarchy, which level you're going. That's something, which they would know. I'm sorry, this question is, I'm asking about second interview. I'm sorry, I didn't get that question. Keshia, we can move because I don't know what's the context. How much salary should a person with no Canadian experience ask? I would encourage you to Google, and look at what the salary range is for that role. Prepare yourself and just ask that salary. It doesn't matter Canadian, no Canadian, because it's on the company to decide whether they want to take you or not, with or with not your Canadian experience. So I would rather ask you to look and do your research and then give a range. Your range should be realistic, not very optimistic, not very pessimistic, realistic. There are tons of resources, and if you look around, you will find the salary range for that role. Next question. I'm worried about multiple stages of interviews and asking the right question at the right time. Assume more technical and specific questions are more appropriate later rounds, or is it smarter to ask more technical and specific stuff early to show interest and appear? Great. Of course, you would have multiple stages of interviews for sure. Nobody would just take you or hire you in 2 rounds. At least minimum, there would be 3 rounds. Minimum. 3 or 4 rounds are norm in any interview. Yes, but you want to make sure you're not asking a technical question to the HR, right? Even if it, you might appear smarter, but then she would just, it depends on HR. Like she would say that, okay, this is a technical question, I might not know. Like if you want to ask, what is the seasonality rate, or what is the, whatever coding, if you have any, technical stuff, you don't want to ask that in the first. Like you want to ask a question which is relevant to that round, relevant to the audience. You want to ask the right question. Like you want to ask a growth question to an HR, an employee question to an HR. You want to ask a technical question to the hiring manager. So I think you want to use your judgment when you use that. Next question, please. What should be the content of thank you letter and length? I think it should be, a thank you should be simple and short. It should be like a max, like 5 lines. You want to thank them for their time and appreciate and giving you the opportunity. You should not make it like so lengthy that they're reading, because you have to also be smart that they have interviewed a lot of candidates, so they have less time. So you want to shine by saying a thanks you, right? But you don't want to overwhelm them by the length. So make sure it's appropriate. Next question, say a candidate is working in an organization with 4 weeks notice, as opposed to, could it dampen their chances of, no, why would it hamper their chances of getting hired in another organization? It doesn't matter 4 weeks or 2 weeks. If your organization has 4 weeks, you will be telling this to your interviewer that I have a 4-week notice, and people understand. So it doesn't hamper your chances, no way. Next question. During the interview, what type of dress and color dress is effective for interview? My friend, I think you've asked this question. I said you have to have a professional dress. I don't know if you're a man, you would want to wear a coat. I'm not sure if you're a lady, you want to wear, like a like a like a decent top. You want to avoid, you want to keep neutral palette on your colors: white, black, gray, blue. These are some of the colors which typically go. And again, like I said, you want to come professional, right? So that's it. Next question. Regarding follow-up after the interview, I've tried to ask for feedback when it was torn down. However, noticed that recruiters don't bother. Yeah, I think sometimes we have to take a pinch of salt that a lot of times people do not answer, and I think it's a great practice to answer or ask questions, but sometimes it might be how you rephrase that question. You might want to rephrase it as like, hey, I kind of learned that I'm not in the running for the role, but however, I really appreciate your opportunity. One of the things I always want to ask, I want to know is, and learn and maybe improve on is, if you can give me any feedback so I can, prepare myself better for, if should there be any chances in future with the same company. So, kind of rephrase it that way, that you want that feedback for learning and for self-development. And that's what, but then again, if there is no feedback, there's unfortunately not a lot you can do. Again, a lot of times recruiters are overwhelmed by the emails, so they might just slip. But if you don't get a feedback, I think I would always, be a little self-evaluate yourself, like how you did. And, you can maybe, I think in time, you will know, how you can better position yourself. A lot of times your interviews went very well, but then you didn't get an offer. But there might be so many reasons. It's not only you, but there might be so many other things. The company priority change, there was a strong reference from somebody. There's so many factors which might change. So I would just say continue to have that practice, but also self-evaluate and introspect. Next question. What's the salary bracket to be given to HR? As I said, do your research, go to Glassdoor and similar websites, do your research, give a realistic salary bracket. And I think that should be good. In second interview, if I want to clear job description, what is the right time? I think right time, you have to go with the flow. There is no right time, like 10 minutes in the interview you have to do, or 20 minutes in the interview. You have to go in the right time. You have to see how the flow of interview is going and then ask that question. So if you feel that interview is, proceeding well, then, you can go from there. Or do you believe, that question kind of really helps being asked upfront? So it depends on where you are in the interview process, and then go with the flow and ask the question. Next question is, should we send a follow-up letter after a few days when they have mentioned they will let us know? No, I mean, if they're told that they're going to come back end of the next week, I would just say have patience. I would say focus on other interviews and move on. Unless by the end of the next week, or, I would, if they say end of the next week, which is maybe Thursday or Friday, I would wait until the next Monday or Tuesday to follow up. I wouldn't kind of go there because, you want to give that 1 or 2 days buffer. People might take vacations, people might have some urgent priorities, etc. So you just want to make sure that you kind of go from there. So if they're saying end of next week, don't sound desperate in following up the letter. It's not going to make any useful case for you. Next question. Do you know how prevalent is performing and completing assignments? It depends. Yes, a lot of times interview process does have assignments and perform tasks because they want to see, how, good you are in the work, or in the, like a slice of life example, they give that. It depends on, again, the company and the role you're applying. If it's a very technical role, they might want to, evaluate before proceeding. Next question is, can I get rehired by a company which I was working with before at my home country? Absolutely, why not? Next question, after how many days we usually hear back from the recruiter post job application? Again, my friend, as I answered, you need to go ahead and set this expectation when they ask you in the last, like, do you have any questions for me? That's when you ask them. That's, how many days, weeks, months, whatever it is. Please ask that question so you are not living in a uncertainty, right? Clarify that question. It's a very standard question you should be asking. Okay.
All right. Lots of questions. Wow.
I have 56 questions.
That's amazing. Thank you everybody for being so active in the Q&A. We really appreciate it. Senator, do you have any closing remarks at this time?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I'm really very happy on receiving so many questions, because I feel the number of questions really show how engaged the audience is and how relevant this topic is, right? Like how relevant it is for, people. And I'm very happy to be, getting this opportunity to talk about it. I think the closing remarks would be, a couple of things which I would want to repeat is, for sure, treat it as you would treat an in-person interview in the terms of seriousness, in terms of preparedness, in terms of all of that. Please look at my do's and don'ts section again. Ask questions. Make sure that you really know the timelines and the next steps in the interview. And I think lastly is be yourself, be authentic, be, once you are authentic, it shows in the interview, it shows you as a person. And I'm sure you should have confidence in you, because you have come so far. You've done like a whole immigration process. You've changed, you've so many things. You've kind of taken a risk in your life. So maybe, you need to make sure that you are confident. That's it.